The morning sun filtered through the smoggy haze of downtown Detroit, painting the streets in muted tones of gold. Liam Price adjusted the rearview mirror of his weathered yellow taxi and took a slow sip of lukewarm coffee from a dented thermos. He was already tired, though the day had barely begun. After 20 years behind the wheel, the daily grind had carved deep lines into his face, and his dreams of something better had long since faded. Factory layoffs had pushed him into this life, a job that was steady but relentless. His small apartment was cluttered with unpaid bills and reminders of a life that felt as if it were slipping through his fingers. Still, he prided himself on a few things: his punctuality, the cleanliness of his cab, and the fact that he treated every passenger with dignity. It wasn't much, but it was his way of holding on to a sense of worth. That morning, as he idled near the train station waiting for a fare, he noticed an elderly man standing on the curb. The man wore a neatly pressed tweed jacket, a felt hat, and carried a sturdy cane in one hand. In the other, he held a bouquet of vibrant carnations. His gait was slow but deliberate as he approached the cab. "Morning, sir," the man said, his voice warm but touched with weariness. "Would you be so kind as to take me to Evergreen Cemetery?" Liam nodded, his curiosity piqued. "Of course. Hop in." The man climbed into the back seat and carefully placed the bouquet beside him. There was a quiet elegance to his movements, as though every action carried significance. Liam glanced at him through the rearview mirror and smiled, visiting someone special. The man returned the smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes, my wife. Today's our anniversary." The words hung in the air like a bittersweet melody. Liam's chest tightened at the thought. He rarely pried into his passengers' lives, but there was something about this man that made him want to know more. "How long were you married?" Liam asked softly as he pulled onto the main road. The man chuckled, a sound rich with memory. 57 years. Margaret was the love of my life. Still is, even now." 57 years, Liam repeated, shaking his head in awe. "That's longer than I've been alive." The man nodded, his gaze fixed on the passing scenery. "It goes by faster than you'd think. One day you're dancing in the kitchen, laughing about nothing, and the next you're holding on to memories." Liam swallowed hard. His own life felt so far removed from the kind of love and connection the man described. His days blurred together in a cycle of fares and survival, with no one waiting for him at home. He wondered if he'd ever find the kind of companionship that could inspire such devotion. As they neared the cemetery, the man leaned forward slightly. "Would you mind waiting for me? It won't take long, and I'll pay for your time." Liam shook his head. "Take as much time as you need." The man smiled, gratitude etched into his features, and stepped out of the cab with his bouquet. Liam watched as he made his way to a modest headstone shaded by a sprawling oak tree. He stayed in the cab, unsure if it would be intrusive to follow, but he couldn't take his eyes off the scene. The man knelt slowly, placing the flowers at the base of the grave. Though Liam couldn't hear his words, he could see the way his lips moved, forming a quiet, heartfelt conversation with the woman he loved. Something about the scene tugged at Liam's heart, stirring emotions he hadn't felt in years. He thought of his late mother, who had always been his anchor, and realized he hadn't visited her grave in over a decade. The weight of work and worry had pushed important things to the back of his mind. But this man, this stranger, reminded him of what truly mattered. After a while, the man returned to the cab, his steps slower now, as if leaving the grave had taken more effort than arriving. He climbed back into the seat and sighed heavily. "Thank you for waiting," he said. "It means more than you know." "No rush," Liam replied, turning the key in the ignition. "Where to next?" "Home, please," the man said, giving an address in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The drive back was quieter, but the man eventually broke the silence, sharing stories of Margaret. He described how they met at a library when she asked him to help retrieve a book on a high shelf. He told Liam about their wedding, where they danced under the stars, and about her laugh, which, he said, could light up a room. Margaret always believed the little moments were what mattered, the man said. Not the big gestures or milestones, but the everyday kindnesses. Those are what make a life worth remembering. When they arrived at his house, the man reached into his pocket and handed Liam 2 bills, a crisp 20, and to Liam's shock, a folded $1,000 bill. "Thank you," the man said, his voice steady but emotional. "For your patience, your kindness, and your company. Strangers like you make the world a little better." Liam stared at the money, speechless. I can't take this." "You can, and you will," the man insisted with a knowing smile. "Do something good with it. Life's too short to wait for the perfect moment." Before Liam could protest further, the man shuffled toward his front door, his cane tapping lightly against the pavement. Liam sat in his cab for a long moment, staring at the money in his hand. It wasn't the amount that overwhelmed him, but the gesture itself, a trust and generosity so profound it left him reeling. As he drove away, Liam felt something he hadn't felt in years, the spark of hope. He didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter would change the trajectory of his life forever. The next morning, Liam woke earlier than usual. He had barely slept, his mind still reeling from the events of the previous day. The elderly man's quiet dignity, the stories of his late wife, and the staggering $1,000 tip weighed heavily on his thoughts. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the trust the man had placed in him to do something good. Those words echoed in his mind, refusing to let go. Liam's first fare of the day was a hurried businessman juggling his briefcase and coffee. The ride was uneventful, as were the next few, but Liam couldn't shake the feeling that the world looked a little different now. The people he drove, each with their own worries, joys, and stories, felt somehow more significant. The man from the cemetery had unlocked something in him, a desire to look beyond the surface. By early afternoon, Liam found himself parked at a diner he often visited between fares. It wasn't much, a small, no-frill spot where the coffee was strong and the pancakes were cheap, but it was familiar. As he sipped his coffee, he overheard a conversation at a nearby table. A young couple sat huddled together, their voices low but tense. "I don't know how we're going to pay for it," the woman said, her fingers nervously twisting a napkin. The man sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'll pick up more shifts, but even then, it's going to be tight. Maybe we can call the clinic and ask for an extension." Liam wasn't one to eavesdrop, but their worry was palpable. He glanced at the $1,000 bill in his wallet, his thoughts swirling. It was a lot of money, more than he'd ever had to spare, but the old man's words returned to him, "Do something good." When the couple's server brought their check, Liam made his move. He approached the counter and gestured to their table. "Put their bill on mine," he said, pulling out the $1,000 bill, "and give them the change." The server's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Liam said, feeling a surge of resolve. "Just don't tell them it was me." He left quickly, slipping out the door before the couple could notice. As he walked back to his cab, his heart raced. It was a strange mix of nerves and exhilaration. The money wasn't his anymore, but he felt lighter, as if he'd let go of a burden he didn't know he was carrying. Later that day, as Liam continued his shift, he picked up a passenger outside a community center. It was a woman in her early 30s, balancing a stack of children's books and a tote bag overflowing with papers. She looked exhausted but managed a polite smile as she climbed into the back seat. "Where to?" Liam asked. "The library downtown," she said. "I'm a volunteer teacher, and we're hosting a reading session there today." "That's great," Liam said, genuinely impressed. "What kind of reading session?" "It's for kids who are struggling in school," she explained. "Many of them come from tough situations, so we try to make it fun and inspiring. But it's hard to keep things going. We're always short on supplies, and finding volunteers can be tricky." Liam felt a familiar tug at his heart. As he drove, he found himself asking more questions about the kids, the program, and what they needed most. By the time they arrived at the library, he'd made up his mind. "You're doing something amazing," he said as she gathered her things. I want to help. The woman looked at him in surprise. Help? Liam reached into his wallet and pulled out several $100 bills, what remained of the tip from the elderly man. Use this for your program. Get the supplies you need, or throw a little party for the kids. The woman stared at the money, her mouth falling open. Are you serious? This is too much. It's not, Liam said firmly. I was given this money to do something good, and I can't think of anything better. Tears welled in her eyes as she took the bills with trembling hands. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Liam said, smiling. Just keep doing what you're doing. As he drove away, Liam felt the same rush of warmth he'd felt at the diner. The money, once so daunting, had turned into a force for good, not just for the people he helped, but for himself. He hadn't solved all his own problems, but for the first time in years, he felt like his life had meaning beyond the daily grind. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the city, Liam parked his cab by the riverfront, a quiet spot he often visited to think. He stared out at the water, the old man's voice playing in his mind like a melody. Strangers like you make the world a little better. He hadn't believed it then. But now, as the ripple of the old man's generosity spread outward, he started to think it might be true. The next morning, Liam woke with a sense of clarity that surprised him. He couldn't remember the last time he felt so focused, so eager to face the day. The $1,000 tip was almost gone, but in its place he'd found something much more valuable: a purpose. Harold, the elderly man, had handed him more than money. He had handed him a way to see the world differently. Liam's first fare of the day was a young man in a delivery uniform, slumped against the curb with a defeated expression. As he climbed into the cab, Liam noticed the man's shoes worn thin, with holes at the toes. The man gave an address to a rundown apartment complex on the city's east side. Tough morning, Liam asked, glancing at him in the mirror. The man sighed. Tough year, really. I've been working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet, but it's like every time I catch up, something else knocks me down. Liam nodded, the man's words striking a chord. He knew that feeling all too well. As they approached the man's destination, Liam made a split-second decision. He flipped off the meter. This one's on me, Liam said. The man blinked in surprise. Are you serious? I don't even have enough for a tip. You don't need one, Liam said with a grin. Just take care of yourself, all right? The man hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. I won't forget this. As the man disappeared into the apartment building, Liam felt the now familiar warmth of having done something good. He realized that, even without the money Harold had given him, he could still find ways to help others. Kindness didn't have to come with a price tag. Later that afternoon, Liam picked up a fare outside a small grocery store. It was a middle-aged woman with a cart full of bags, struggling to juggle her purchases. She seemed flustered as she climbed into the cab, muttering apologies. No need to apologize, Liam said, helping her with the bags. Long day. She laughed, though it sounded tired. You could say that. I'm running behind on everything. And my car broke down last week. It's been one thing after another. As Liam drove, the woman explained that she was a caregiver for her elderly father, who lived alone across town. The groceries were for him, and she visited daily to help with meals and housework. She mentioned how difficult it was to balance her job, her father's needs, and her own life, but she spoke with a quiet determination that reminded Liam of Harold. When they reached her father's house, the woman began rummaging in her purse for cash, but Liam stopped her. It's all right, he said. No charge. Her eyes widened. But why? Let's just say I'm paying forward a little kindness I received recently, Liam said, smiling. The woman stared at him, her expression softening. That's rare these days. Thank you. As Liam drove away, he felt lighter, as though he was shedding the weight of years spent focusing solely on his own struggles. Harold's example had shown him that giving, in whatever way he could, brought a kind of joy he hadn't known he was missing. That evening, as Liam prepared to park his cab and call it a day, his phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number, but something urged him to answer. "Hello, this is Liam," he said. "Liam?" "This is Susan," the voice replied. "Harold's daughter. He mentioned you recently, said you drove him to the cemetery." Liam's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, I did. Is everything all right?" Susan hesitated, and Liam braced himself for bad news. "He's in the hospital," she said finally. "He's stable, but he's been asking for you. I think it would mean a lot to him if you visited." Liam agreed without hesitation. The next morning, he found himself walking through the quiet halls of the hospital, a small bouquet of daisies in hand. When he entered Harold's room, the elderly man's face lit up with recognition. "Liam," Harold exclaimed, his voice weak but filled with warmth. "You came." "Of course," Liam said, placing the flowers on the bedside table. "How are you feeling?" Harold chuckled. "Old. But I've been old for a while now." The two men laughed, and Liam pulled up a chair. They talked for hours, their conversation weaving through Harold's life with Margaret, Liam's new approach to his work, and the people they had both met along the way. Harold listened intently as Liam described the small acts of kindness he'd been inspired to carry out, a knowing smile on his face. "You've done more than I ever hoped for," Harold said, his voice tinged with pride. "Margaret would have loved you, you know. She believed in the goodness of people." "She sounds incredible," Liam said. "And you've changed my life, Harold. I can't thank you enough." "You've done the same for me," my friend Harold replied. "And that's what matters, isn't it? Helping each other, leaving the world a little better than we found it." As Liam left the hospital that day, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Harold's generosity had set something in motion, a ripple effect of kindness that was reshaping not just Liam's life, but the lives of everyone he touched. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about carrying forward a legacy of compassion and connection. For the first time in years, Liam felt like he was truly living. The following weeks brought a sense of clarity to Liam's life that he hadn't experienced in years. Driving his cab no longer felt like a grind but a way to meet people and leave small imprints of kindness wherever he went. Harold's influence lingered in every decision he made, each interaction a chance to spread the light Harold and Margaret had cultivated in their own lives. One afternoon, Liam found himself parked outside a high school, waiting for his next fare. A teenage girl with a backpack slung over one shoulder approached his cab. Her uniform was slightly worn, her shoes scuffed, and her expression uncertain. "Can you take me to the public library downtown?" she asked, climbing into the back seat. "Sure thing," Liam said, starting the meter. As they drove, Liam noticed the girl fidgeting with the strap of her bag, her gaze fixed on the window. She looked anxious, as though carrying the weight too heavy for someone her age. "You all right?" Liam asked gently. The girl hesitated before answering. "It's nothing. Just school stuff." Liam glanced at her through the rearview mirror, sensing there was more to the story. "You heading to the library for school?" "Not exactly," she admitted. "I'm meeting my tutor. I've been struggling in a few subjects, and my parents can't really afford extra help, but there's this program that's free. If you can get there." Liam nodded, understanding the unspoken frustration. He thought of all the times he'd felt stuck, unable to catch a break despite working hard. When they reached the library, the girl began rummaging in her bag for money, but Liam shook his head. "This one's on me," he said. Her eyes widened. "What? Why?" "Call it a little kindness," Liam said with a smile. "Good luck with your tutoring." The girl stared at him for a moment, then gave him a shy smile. "Thank you," she said softly before heading into the library. As he drove away, Liam thought about the girl's determination. She reminded him of himself at her age, trying to make something of his life despite the odds. It was moments like this that kept him going, small acts that didn't change the world but might change a day. That evening, Liam decided to visit Harold at the hospital again. He stopped by a flower shop to pick up another bouquet of daisies and drove to the familiar building. When he entered Harold's room, Susan was sitting by her father's bedside, holding his hand. Harold greeted him with a bright smile. "Back again." "I couldn't stay away," Liam said, setting the flowers on the table. "How's our friend doing?" he asked Susan. "He's stubborn as ever," she said with a laugh. "But he's stable." Harold chuckled. "I'll take stubborn as a compliment." Liam pulled up a chair, and the three of them talked for hours. Harold listened as Liam recounted his most recent fares, including the girl he'd driven to the library. "You're doing exactly what I hoped for," Harold said, his voice filled with pride. "It's the little moments that matter. Margaret always said that." "She sounds incredible," Liam said. "I think about her a lot, how much she meant to you and how you've carried her memory forward." Harold's expression softened, and he nodded. "She made me a better man, Liam. That's what love does. And now you're doing the same for others. That's the best way to honor her." As the evening wore on, Harold grew visibly tired, his eyelids drooping. Susan insisted he get some rest, and Liam rose to leave. Before he did, Harold reached for his hand. "Liam," he said, his voice quieter now, "don't stop. Whatever you've started, don't stop." "I won't," Liam promised, his throat tightening. "Thank you, Harold. For everything." When Liam left the hospital, the city lights seemed brighter than usual. Harold's words stayed with him, filling him with a renewed sense of purpose. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, he was excited to find out. As he climbed into his cab and drove into the night, he felt like he wasn't just moving passengers anymore. He was moving hope, one small act at a time. A few weeks later, Liam received a call from Susan early one morning. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Liam, I thought you should know. My father passed away last night. It was peaceful." He was talking about Margaret, smiling, right until the end. The news hit Liam like a wave. Though he had prepared himself for this moment, it didn't make the loss any easier. Harold had become more than a fare or even a friend. He was a mentor, a guide, someone who had changed Liam's life in ways he was only beginning to understand. "I'm so sorry," Susan, Liam said. "Your father. He was remarkable. If there's anything I can do—" "There is," Susan interrupted. "He left something for you. He was very specific about it. Could you come by the house later today?" Liam agreed, and that afternoon he found himself at Harold's modest home. Susan greeted him at the door with a small wooden box in her hands. It was beautifully crafted, with intricate carvings of oak leaves and Harold's initials engraved on a brass plate. "This is for you," Susan said. "He put it together years ago. But after he met you, he added a few things. He said you'd know what to do with it." Liam's hands trembled as he took the box. "Thank you," he said softly. He brought the box back to his cab and sat in the driver's seat, staring at it for a long moment before opening the lid. Inside was a collection of keepsakes. A leather-bound journal with Harold's handwriting filling every page. A bundle of photographs of Harold and Margaret through the years, their love radiating from each image. A small key with a note attached for the drawer at the library, under Margaret's name. And at the very bottom, an envelope with Liam's name on it. Liam unfolded the letter inside and began to read. "Dear Liam, if you're reading this, I've joined Margaret at last. Don't be sad. My life was full, and meeting you made my final days all the richer. You reminded me that kindness still exists in this world and that it's worth sharing, even with strangers. Now it's your turn." The journal contains the story of my life with Margaret. Use it to inspire others to live with love and compassion. The key will unlock something at the library, a little treasure we wanted to leave for the world. As for the rest, you already know what to do. Keep going, Liam. Keep spreading light. With gratitude. Harold. Tears streamed down Liam's face as he finished reading. Harold's parting gift wasn't just a box of mementos, it was a legacy. The next day, Liam visited the library, key in hand. The librarian recognized Margaret's name immediately and led him to an antique writing desk in the archives. Liam unlocked the drawer and found an envelope filled with cash, several $1,000s, and a note from Margaret. To whoever finds this, use this money for something beautiful. Plant a garden, fund a program, or simply make someone's day a little brighter. Love is not meant to be kept, it is meant to be shared. With love. Margaret. Liam sat in silence, overwhelmed by the generosity and vision of Harold and Margaret. They had lived their lives as a testament to the power of small, meaningful acts of love. Over the following months, Liam worked tirelessly to honor their legacy. He used Margaret's gift to fund a small community program for children who needed help with schoolwork, partnering with the library to create a space filled with books, art supplies, and caring volunteers. He named it the Margaret and Harold Center for Kindness and Learning. The project gained momentum quickly. The library became a hub of positivity, drawing people from all walks of life who wanted to give back. Liam's story of a simple taxi driver inspired by an elderly couple's love spread through the community, encouraging others to find ways to make a difference. One evening, as Liam walked through the center, watching children read and paint under the guidance of smiling volunteers, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. He thought of Harold and Margaret and the light they had brought into the world. Their love had been a candle, and now, thanks to them, that flame burned brightly in him and everyone he touched. Harold was right, the little moments truly did matter. Liam climbed back into his cab that night, ready to meet the next passenger and continue spreading the light. Harold and Margaret's story had become his, and he knew in his heart that their legacy would live on, one act of kindness at a time.